In response to the Gunnison sage-grouse's declining population, the Bureau of Land Management in 1994 invited all interested parties to discuss the bird's future. Thus was created the Gunnison Basin Gunnison Sage-Grouse Working Group to write a conservation plan for increasing the bird's population. Dr. Clayton Braun, a 30-year staff member of the Colorado Division of Wildlife and co-discoverer of the Gunnison sage-grouse, had first-hand experience with the working group's activities. In September 2004, I asked Braun about the group's accomplishments.
They did an evaluation of that project in the early 2000s. Might have been in 2002 or 2003. And the evaluation essentially pointed out that they had failed. A lot of finger pointing was done in the early 2000s about the Gunnison work group and how they had failed to deliver. And they did. They failed to deliver on some items. They did very well at certain things and they did very poorly at other things. In terms of doing anything for sage-grouse, they did poorly. The population declined. And some people say that it was drought. Okay, and I'll stick to my earlier comment that these birds evolved with drought. It wasn't drought, it was a combination of factors, not just one. One of the big problems in the Gunnison Basin is the county commissioners. Okay, if you don't get county commissioners to buy in and support a plan, it's very likely you're not going to have success. The county commissioners in Gunnison finally sent a planner to the meetings, and that person was involved for some time. But the county commissioners, who are mostly livestock interest and development interest, never really signed on. Even though they, quote, signed the plan, they didn't really sign on. Consequently, they allow development of house sites, dump sites, whatever, right into the heart of the Gunnison Sage-Grouse range. All these things are negative. The NRCS has been very negative in the Gunnison Basin. They had deliberately tried to say how great they are, while at the same time they're helping private ranchers fragment the habitat and kill or treat sagebrush, making the patches smaller, less useful. So Natural Resource Conservation Service, which I used to work for, is one of the guilty parties. But they're not the only guilty party. The BLM has done some things they're trying hard, and to their credit, but they haven't really been able to effectively change allotment management plans, what they call AMPs. And the Tamichi allotment is a good example. Even though they said they did, they really didn't. So I look at all the various groups that are involved at Gunnison, and I remind everybody to think that this is a voluntary. No one had a gun at their head to do anything. The BLM theoretically was going to follow whatever. Sage-grouse are a sensitive species for the BLM. The BLM is supposed to treat sensitive species on their own sensitive species list as they would candidate species. If they did, you wouldn't know it, because things haven't really progressed properly for Gunnison sage-grouse. And so I can commiserate with people who say, hey, we got this great plan, and I agree, we have a workable plan, but there isn't any money behind it, or very little money, and it's all voluntary on the part of everybody, the Division of Wildlife, the BLM, the Forest Service, and the Forest Service doesn't have clean hands at all. They've been up burning on Flat Top Mountain, burning out winter habitat, trying to create brood habitat for sage-grouse. Sage-grouse north of the Tamichi Creek and the Gunnison River do not need brood habitat. They need winter habitat. And so what does the Forest Service do? They burn the winter habitat to create brood habitat. Makes good sense, doesn't it? And that dates back to the 1980s when Jerry Hupp point blank told them that and prepared a report to that effect. So everybody's a little bit screwy with this. And there was a lot of anger in the Gunnison Valley about Gunnison sage-grouse numbers going down. Oh, woe is us, they're going to be listed. Life is going to change, it's going to be terrible. Even a listing wouldn't make life terrible. I mean, unless you define critical habitat and enforce it. And I can't remember the last time that the Fish and Wildlife Service really volunteered to list critical habitat or enforce the provisions of the Endangered Species Act on a scale large enough to be effective. They might do it when you have 30 shrews left, or 500 bats, or 13 owls, whatever. But even there, they typically will turn and run when there's pressure from the developers on a variety of things. And the Pima County, Arizona is an outstanding example of where the Fish and Wildlife Service doesn't have the courage to do what it should do, what is required by law. They don't do it. The only way you can get them to do anything, really, is to sue them. It's terrible. Unprofessional. Species will disappear before things happen. That's real life. That's happening. And as I'm sitting here, things aren't going well, and species are disappearing.